Hello, and welcome to Austin Prep's Counseling Center. This is our first webinar, and this is a new feature that we are hoping to offer on a more regular basis because we know of the busy schedules that parents have working and running from one activity to another and juggling the lives of not just your responsibilities, but your family's responsibilities. So today, this broadcast really focuses on seniors. And as we near that May 1st deadline, we still have some students trying to decide where they're going to go next year. We have other students who are all settled and starting to get those nervous butterflies in their stomach that accompanies their first really big adult step into the world. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge all of the families and all of the different spaces that they may be in at this very moment. I know I have one student who is actually out of state right now, trying to visit more schools, and I have a couple others who are hoping to do the same thing and this week. So we will divide this webinar into two segments. We are going to first talk about those students that are still trying to come to that decision and things that you really want to consider in these final days. And then the second part of the webinar, we're really going to focus on what is that transition going to look like. So much time and energy and money goes into the college application process, and really it begins well before junior year. The studies show that vast majority of students who plan on going to college is something that families have been talking about since they were little, as early as kindergarten. So it's something that, as a parent, you are constantly thinking about, that next big final step. Some of final step for some students in their education, and in others, one of the last steps before they then embark on their master's or a doctoral program. So today, what I would like to do is I will be switching between me speaking and a PowerPoint presentation that I have developed, and I want you just to bear with me a little bit, just because this is my first time doing a webinar. And so if you have questions, I believe that it allows you to communicate them to me through written form. And if for some reason I'm not seeing them, please don't think I'm ignoring you. I'm just still trying to figure out everything that's going on here. So with that, I want to actually flip the order I'm going to do things. So I am going to start with some of the transition issues, and then I'll talk about the students that have yet to make a decision and some techniques that might help your family and your child reach a decision that you feel comfortable with and reach a decision that you feel is well thought out. So we're going to flip to the PowerPoint presentation. And what you see here and the things that I would like to talk about today are the student transition and things that you really need to think about, and what resources are available to you as a parent, especially because if your child is living away at school, you're not with them every day. You don't see them all the time, and you need to know if they call you and they have some of these concerns, what resources can you access for your child immediately, since they can't just come home to you and ask you to take care of them. So the following topics: newfound independence, financial management, class selection and the importance of that, managing their time, possible mental health issues that can come up, roommate issues, and academic struggles. Okay. So there's a couple things that I think is really important with financial management. I know families at this point all have various degrees of comfort in discussing, how you're paying for college, what responsibility is going to lie on the student's shoulders, and what responsibility you're willing to take on. And so I know some students are more aware of that and others are not as aware because the parents have chosen to keep that more private between them. But as you're sending them off to college, it's now going to be on their shoulders to learn how to manage their money and how much should they spend and how do they make sure it lasts throughout the course of a year. And there are also some tricky things that I think are worth mentioning and explaining to you so that you can take some of these steps preemptively before you go into the fall. For example, today was the AP pre-grid meeting before school, and the students had to bring checks to pay for those AP exams. And some parents weren't aware of how much it would be, so they had asked their child to fill out, the amount of money and, finish basically filling out the check. And as we were going through them after the event, we noticed that a lot of the students who were doing that didn't know how to fill out the check. Some of them wrote in the actual numeral value for the money, but then didn't write out how much that's for. So every child has a different level of awareness in what banking looks like and how to make checks out and that sort of thing. But I think it's something that you really need to figure out. Now, a couple of things. I know some parents like to set up a separate account for their child while they're away at college, and then they can, if you're going to set up a separate account, which I do encourage you to do so, I do encourage you to keep it in your name. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when you put it in your child's name and there is money in that account, when you go to fill out the financial aid forms next year, any money that is in your child's name counts against you at a much higher level than money that's in your name. So by setting up a separate account where you can share online the bank account, it'll allow not only you, but your child to be able to monitor the spending that's going on, you from home and your child from at school. So I think that that's a very important thing. And I know it can get complicated when you try to do that with your own personal checking account. So what I often encourage parents to do is set up another checking account in your name and then link your child's funds in there. And then what you can do is together you can manage. Before your child goes away to school, sit down and say, okay, how many months are in the school year? You have September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So you have 9 months. So whatever money that the student has set aside for spending money and for incidentals and things like that, you have to have a discussion of how are we going to spread that out over 9 months? And what big events do you think might come up during those 9 months that you have to make sure that you budget for? Some areas that I think sometimes get forgotten about but are important to discuss, especially. One of them would be books. The cost of books has skyrocketed. Obviously, some schools will offer books available on an iPad or something like that. Other colleges have used book sales. What I think is important is that you do some research now and find out when the books typically become available for the courses that your child is taking. So the advantage to this is if you call the bookstore and find out when you can get that book list, you can then go on Amazon or other websites and try to work around the bookstore. Because sometimes their used prices are not as good as the used prices that you can get on other vendor websites. So that's going to occur. That's going to require a little more research on your part, but it can also save a very good chunk of money. So that would be one significant piece of advice that I would give you. The cost of books per semester can be as high as $750, depending on what required courses your child is taking and how widely the book is available. Is it a new edition? If it's a new edition, you won't be able to find it used anywhere. So you really want to plan, I would say safely about $1,250 to $1,500 for books for the entire year. And the other important thing that you need to have about that with that conversation is who's paying for those books. I've been in situations with former students who send me an email and tell me, my parents didn't tell me I was paying for my books. And I say, are you sure? And they lose a lot of their spending money for the semester on that. So it's important to have those sort of things outlined. If your child's bringing a car to school, who's paying for the gas in the car, those kinds of things. In terms of credit cards, on many college campuses do not allow credit card companies to come on campus anymore, but some still do. And so you want to have a conversation with your child about, do I think it's okay for you to sign up for a credit card? Are you more comfortable with your child having a credit card in your link to your account, but in their name? So That's definitely been something that's become a lot more popular in recent years, where you send your kid off to college, God forbid they get in some situation where they need to buy a plane ticket home as an emergency or something of that sort of nature, and they need a credit card. It can be good to get one in their name, but link it to your account, and obviously you'll be able to see if there's any spending going on with that. And then just stress that that is in case of emergencies only. As the PowerPoint shows, budgets are like diets. You may go over one week, but then go on to the next. So I think it's good to support financial responsibility, but at the same time, there may be different events that come up on campus, or a concert or something that they really want to go to. And you want to be able to make sure that, you know, if they are going to spend a larger amount of their spending money on something, that they are aware of the implications of other events that it might not allow them to do. And then the last thought on that is there should definitely always be a cushion. You want to save them an emergency, you know, a little emergency money on the side, just in case, you know, for some unforeseen reason they have a big expense and they're not aware of it. I think it's good to have these conversations starting in June, get through all of the emotion of prom, and for those of you that are in senior week, and for those that are going away to Disney, and even graduation. Those are huge milestones in your child's life, and you don't want to add the stress of trying to plan this in addition to what's going on then. So maybe let them kind of go through that emotional time, and then I would say, you know, the mid to end June, start having conversations about, okay, we need to set up the bank account. We need to figure this out. Are you going to have a credit card? How much spending money do you need? And especially if they're working summer jobs, it's a really good idea to figure out, okay, how much spending money do I want to put aside for this summer, and how much do I need to put aside for the academic year? So that's a good conversation to have. I always encourage seniors to, whatever summer job they have, ask them if they're willing to take them back during the semester recess, because unlike our Christmas break, which feels long at 2 weeks, a lot of college breaks are longer than that. They're about a month. So if they're able to keep a good relationship with their current employer, you know, especially during that holiday season, a lot of places will take back those students because they are older, they are in college, they can take on more responsibility, and they can be the mentors for the high school students that are continuing to work at those places while your children are away at college. So that would be another thing that I think would be important. I'm just going to switch screens right now, so that way I can hold on. That way I can see if there are any questions. I just would like to see if there are any questions that anyone has about the financial management piece at this time. Okay, so we are going to go back to sharing, going back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Here we go. So I really love this idea and this quote about independence. Most new college students can't wait to be on their own. They want to make their own decisions, doing what they want, when they want, and how they want. Many new college students also receive a rude awakening when the realization hits home that they are truly on their own. Mom isn't there to make sure that they get out of bed and go to school, or that they have clean clothes to wear. Professors aren't quite as forgiving as high school teachers when assignment deadlines are missed. Dad isn't there to provide the few extra bucks needed to satisfy that pizza craving at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I think this gives you just a snapshot of what a big event that they're going through. For many students, especially those that are traveling further from home, that distance can feel pretty isolating. And what is important to do is remind them that they are not in this alone. Every other student is in the same boat they are in. They're all just as nervous as they are. They are all just as scared. They are all as just excited. And so to expect that the transition is never going to have a moment of struggle or a moment of doubt it would be unrealistic. Most students encounter some sort of transition issue at one point or another. And so I think it's important at that point to just reassure them that they have been prepared well, especially, you know, at Austin. I know that they've been pushed to the limit in terms of their academics. And I think it's just important that they know that you have faith in them and that they just have to continue to keep, you know, getting up in the morning, keep going to classes, keep seeking out new people. The college social environment tends to be much different from the high school environment. So what it tends to be is people are not nearly as sectioned into groups. They're more inclusive. So they might have friends from class that they study with, and then they'll have other friends that they do this with, or they'll have other friends that they go shopping with. So it's important to just remind them that they should be open to meeting new people and trying to figure out how they go about forming new relationships and really getting to know people well. Sometimes first impressions and who people think they seem to be doesn't end up who they are being. So it's important to teach them to be conservative in trusting people too much too soon, but at the same time also being open to developing those relationships. So that's a really fine balance, and just one that definitely needs to be really thought about. Okay, so if you think about high school and you estimate that the students here are in class for basically 6.5 hours a day, and you multiply that times 5 days a week, you're really in school here for about 32 hours a week. And that's a lot of time. And what sometimes happens to college students when they transition is that they're really only in the classroom between 15 and 16 hours a week. So their actual class time is essentially cut in half. And so when they start to get overwhelmed, and if they call you and they say they have no idea how they're going to do this all, and how they have so much responsibility and they don't know how to manage it, it's important to remind them that if they simply took the time that they spent, you know, in high school and applied that same amount of time so that they were really in class like 30 hours a week by doing homework, that's going to make a big chunk. Granted, some classes are going to require a lot more than that, but they have to feel empowered is that they have the time to be successful. And with the transition emotions and feelings and different things that go on for them, it's good to remind them, like, listen, your demands on your time were a lot higher in high school, and you can do this, and it is very manageable. It's just spending your time wisely. And some students thrive under a lot of structure. You know, those 3-sport athletes, or those, you know, artists who are constantly in drama productions or doing art classes or dancing 5 days a week, you know, and they've done that all through high school and go to high school and be successful. You know, a lot of that structure for some students helps them stay on task when they are doing homework. So in other words, the lack of time makes the time that they have available, they use it very wisely. So for some students, having so much more time and less structure isn't actually a good thing. So helping your child structuring that time. Okay, I only have 2 classes today from 11 to 1. I can sleep until 10:45. Okay, that's one choice. And then you're going to have to spend a lot more time in the afternoon doing some of that homework because you didn't take advantage of the morning hours before class because you chose to sleep in. So it's also about learning with students. Are you more of a morning person? Are you more of a night person? And making sure that you really take into consideration and learning about who, you know, the child needs to look at themselves and say, who am I? How do I best learn? And how can I create that environment for me? Because college really allows you to do that. It allows you to create the environment that you will be successful in. So if you want to study at midnight because you're more of a night owl and that works for you, great. If you want to get up before class and study then and that works for you, that's also wonderful. So having them doing some thinking with them about, okay, you know, this is a $250,000 investment for some people, depending on where you're going to school. And I want to make sure my child is making the most of that money and preparing for a career and life after college and independence. And that's really the whole point. Yes, it's the social, and yes, it's having fun and finding yourself. And that is equally important, but it's also really preparing you for the next phase in your life. Things that can help with the transition issues that are outlined on this screen: activities, finding those extracurricular clubs does a world of good. Number one, it allows students to explore things that they maybe thought they might be interested in high school but didn't have time to explore. It also introduces them to new people that maybe they wouldn't know otherwise if they didn't join that club. Part-time jobs can also introduce them to people and help offset some of the costs and help provide spending money that they need for their daily life. Intramurals for those that either, miss their high school athletic team, or those who, weren't super athletic but want to play something for fun. There are definitely good things that can happen and good opportunities at college for everyone to find their place. But it's important that the student really says, okay, how am I going to find my niche, and what's the best way to do about that? And the best way to do that is to really be vulnerable, and that's scary. I mean, you have to be vulnerable. You have to open yourself up. You have to look at pursuing new avenues of things that might bring interest or enhance a student's knowledge in a certain area, or just clubs for pure fun. And so making sure that your child is doing that will also decrease the likelihood of transition issues lasting longer and turning into your child wanting to transfer. I try to constantly say to them, this isn't a romantic comedy, meaning your school isn't perfect. No school is perfect anywhere in the country. Just like when you get married, your spouse isn't going to be perfect and you're not going to be perfect. So I try to remind them that there are going to be faults everywhere, but it's recognizing the faults, and you can either be active and try to change them for the better at that school, or you can also find the strengths of that school and access them and take advantage of them, because there's a wealth of opportunity on every college campus. You just have to go and find it. Okay, so mental health issues. I think they're important to discuss because mental health issues predominantly present themselves in the middle to late teenage years and early 20s. So you can have a child that has had no mental health issues start to struggle a little bit with mental health, and this is the age where it tends to come out. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to know. There's really situational, situational depression, when that's really, that you might see that in the adjustment phase. You might see some sadness, some crying, some irritability. It's important to ask them, are they eating? Are they eating their meals? Are they getting enough sleep? Just are they having a hard time staying focused in class? Frequently educators and families look at the grades, and we all try to make the grades better, but the grades are never the problem. The grades are the result of other issues that are happening outside of the classroom, that are happening inside for the student, that's distracting them from having the ability to be successful. And so you have to kind of figure this out. Is this something where it's, it runs in your family? It's something where they don't feel like they have any reason to be sad, but they just are, or are they trying to deal with a complicated situation? Every college has a counseling center on staff. And so usually it's in a convenient place on the college campus. And they do that in a way, so it's usually in an area that offers itself some privacy in terms of, it's not in the center of the quad saying, here, counseling center here. So it gives some people a little bit of confidentiality. And the services are part of what you pay for your tuition. So it's definitely a good resource to have. And if your child is having a hard time adjusting and transitioning, it's definitely you want to be aware of it, and you want to reach out to the counseling center. If your child is hesitant, you can go online and you can talk to the staff at the counseling center, and you can also figure out where it is on campus. As you're moving them in, it can be good just to point it out so that they know where it is if anything should come up. The other thing that's important to know is that if you do have a child that sometimes struggles with a mental health issue, you want to actually reach out to the counseling center before you are transitioning to college. And the reason for that being is you want to be able to set up a relationship and maybe even get to meet the counselor with your child at the beginning when they're, when they're moving in, or during orientation if orientation is before. So this way that you can you can preemptively have building a new support system so that it's in place. So that way when you need it, it's already there, instead of you realize you need a support system and then it takes some time to figure out how to get it. And just encourage your students to be open with you and let you know how it's really going. These are 2 websites at the bottom that can be very useful in terms of resources. Okay, so roommate complications. I truly hope for nothing but very happy roommate stories, but that is not always the case in college. It definitely wasn't the case for me. I had to switch out of my roommate's room into a different room after a couple months. But it is something, you think about it, you're putting all of these 18-year-olds, some 19-year-olds, some 17 even, together in a small space, and the emotions are high. Some of them are homesick, some of them are nervous, some of them are lacking the self-confidence they need to be successful, and you're putting them all in a tiny space and then sending them on their way. And so it's important when they're trying to select a roommate. As I was talking with a senior right before April break, we were talking about her decision to clearly let the school pick a roommate for her. And her rationale was, you can always appear some way on Facebook or Instagram, but, I don't really actually know who you are. Like, you can appear some way, but that might not be, maybe you really are a night owl, but you're just like the way I look on Facebook and think we would be a good match. And so then all of a sudden, your child really wants to study in the morning, and this person said, oh yeah, I want to study in the morning too. And really they like to work at 3 in the morning, and that's what they meant by early morning. So it's important to just really take serious consideration in who do you want to room with, and being honest in the surveys that colleges send you if you want to be paired with a random, because they do their best to put like people together. So that way, you're 2 strangers sleeping in the same space, and there's a level of trust and intimacy in that, just in that, you're going to be, you're going to be sleeping in the same room every night. So you really want to be careful in how you go about selecting that person. There are things that you can do in advance, and I think part of that is trying to open the lines of communication before you get to school. Talk about things like which person's going to bring the fridge, which person's going to bring the TV, which person is going to bring, a hot pot to heat up food, or a microwave. So it's whatever, you want to divvy up those expenses between you and the future roommate. And you also you want to lay out some boundaries, like, what am I okay with? What are you okay with? What does your room look like at home? Like, these are all really good questions to ask. And if you are going to try to pick someone on Facebook or some other social media avenues and select through there, I think it's important to ask some of these tough questions. Like, what's your house like at home? Is it loud? Is it quiet? How do you like to study? Do you always play the radio? Just things like that, because you are, you're moving in with someone. It's a big deal. Okay, academic struggles. So why is there attrition? I mean, I'm sure as you were going through the college process, you heard people talk about 6-year graduation rates and retention rates after freshman year to sophomore year and things of that nature. We do in the United States have a lot of people go to college, but unfortunately a large chunk of them don't finish. And that's unfortunate for many reasons. And there will always be some students who do transfer that, they do everything they can and it's just not the right fit. And that does happen, but it happens a lot less to our students than is the average. And so what I think is important is to say, okay, as much as it's important to know where the counseling center is for the emotional struggles, it's important to know where the academic supports are and who can your child turn to. And there are a variety of resources. It's important to establish a relationship with the professor right off the bat. It's important to keep those syllabuses, the syllabi that you get at the beginning of the year, because it tells you right where the professor's office hours are. And then you have to say to your child, do you know what office hours are? I mean, if you've been to college, you know what they are, but your child might not know what that means. So you want to explain that to them. This is where you can go. If you're struggling in this class, you should see the professor in the office hours. Some professors like you to email them and tell them that you're coming, just making sure that you're following the protocol of the professor. And the other thing that is so key and I think can be very advantageous is becoming best friends with your advisor. The advisor will know all the courses that will fulfill the most requirements with one course. So for example, when I was at Villanova, we had a certain number of theology credits we had to take. We had a certain number of women's studies credits we had to take, and a certain number of diversity credits we have to take. And I sat down with my advisor and I said, are there any courses that would actually take care of all three of those three requirements in one course? And they tended to be very hard courses, but it allowed me to study abroad and take whatever I wanted. And it allowed me to, second semester my senior year, take whatever I wanted, because I learned I needed more credits, but I learned how to get the freedom to take those things that interested me that did not fall in my major. So it's definitely something that you want to encourage your student to do, is to get to know your advisor and not to feel bad like, oh, I don't want to bother them, or they're busy on research, or they're busy teaching, I don't know how to approach them. It's part of their responsibility and it's part of their contract that they be an advisor to advisees. So it's important that your child knows that that's a person that you really need to develop a relationship with. How can parents help from far away? And that's a really good question, and it's a really good point. Some parents, have a background in engineering, and so they can really help with chemistry or math, or other parents are in publishing and can help edit that paper. I mean, with the ability of, doing FaceTime or things like that, it makes it easier if you really need to have that conversation and really need to help them from afar. But I think it's also important at this point in their lives to teach them that independence and to teach them to figure out, okay, I'm here, but you're there, and you need to figure out the academic resources that are available to you. Like, this is part of the growing and learning and becoming an adult process. How can you get your self-help there? And if you've already visited the academic support help when you were dropping your child off, then they'll know where to go. So that's why I think it's important as parents, you do all the orientation things and you drop them off, and all of that is good, but also say, okay, here's your help if you're struggling emotionally. Here's where your help is if you're struggling with that math paper. Here are the grad students that'll help you edit that English paper. So have those already in place and make sure your student knows where it is. So that way you avoid having them feel so overwhelmed that they don't know where to go. Okay, so we talk a lot about the students' adjustments and, what is that like for them, and how do we help them? But I think what sometimes is forgotten is it's an adjustment for parents. You have spent the last 18 years, blood, sweat, and tears trying to help your children be the best human beings that they can be, and then you let go. And then you hope that everything that you taught them is instilled in them in such a solid place that they use it, and that they, that they go into the world with all of those values that you hope you gave them. So I think it's just, there are hormonal adjustments that go on for females during about this age time. And there's also just there's a change in the relationship between couples. You spent so much time devoting to your child, and you spent so much time talking about it and what to do. And some parents are great. They can't wait to have the newfound freedom back. They can't wait to be the couple that they were before they had kids and start transitioning back to that. And for other people, it's a little bit harder. They don't know how to find that. They don't know, like, okay, what do we do now? I mean, we don't have a baseball game to go to. We don't have a dance recital to see. We don't have, a job to go visit them at. So it's definitely something that you have to figure out. And then what tends to happen is once you go through those adjustment changes and you figure out and develop a new pattern, they come home. So by the end of November, you start to kind of get used to, okay, this is our life and our quieter house, and it's neater, and I can do a lot less laundry and all of those great things. And then they come back and it's like the whole house seems in upheaval. They bring 20 loads of laundry. They eat a ton. I mean, everything changes. So I think a very, very key thing is to think about what rules are you going to have when your child gets home. Don't wait until your student comes home at Thanksgiving, is so excited to see all their friends from home and get together with people, but you've never had the preemptive conversation of, okay, how late are you allowed to stay out now that you're in college? What time are you expected home? How often do you need to call me? And students are going to push back. They're going to say, I was just I know I mentioned laundry briefly, just to piggyback on that. We do talk to the students actually about some of these things in group. We are doing that tomorrow and Friday. And what fascinates me is there are definitely a good cohort of students who have been doing laundry for a while. They know how to do it. They know what to do and all of that jazz. And then there's a good cohort of students who have absolutely no idea. So teaching them some of those skills, even healthy eating, how do I pick healthy meals and avoid that freshman 15, and I'm in the cafeteria and I can go back and have 7 plates and I can eat as much as I want and I can get seconds, and you want to try to gauge some of those issues beforehand so that you can address them before you find yourself there. So I just have a little bit of a short activity, and I want you to just kind of jot down a few things as I pose these questions to you. I just want you to write down, you know, a sentence. Who's going to pay for books? What is your initial thought right now? Is it going to be you or is it going to be your child? So take a minute, figure that out. And I really encourage that you have your spouse do the same. And your child, and write down all your answers and then not share them with each other, and then use that as a springboard for your conversation. Number 2, I would say, how much spending money do you think is appropriate per month for the 9 months that you're not going to be in school, or for the 9 months you are going to be in school? So I would write down a number, whatever you think that may be. Next, I think you should write down, is your child allowed to go on spring break? Is your child, do you have a feeling about it? Are you supportive? Are you not supportive? Who would pay for that? Would it be you or your student? That's something that comes up. Would you support it if it was community service work and help pay for it? Would you not support if it was recreational? Figuring that out. Books, obviously, who's paying for those? I think I said that. And then I think the big thing is just curfew and the household responsibility when they transition back over the month, over the winter break, over the break that they get and they can come home. You want to know what is the parameters. Are they expected to still do the dishes after dinner? Are they expected to be home at dinner? Are they expected, what time is their curfew? What do you expect them to do? And have that laid out so that way you can just enjoy the time that you do have with them because they're returning from school. Okay, so when I gave this survey to students a couple of years ago, I've tallied some of the data, and so we're trying a new system this year, doing the webinar. So I'll see how this goes, but I just want to share some survey answers in the past. 53 students said no curfew when they come home from school, and others said 12, 1, or 2 a.m. The spending money that students suggested per month was a range, but they averaged around $200. And both parents and students should contribute towards the spending money. Spring break didn't seem to be a big deal to most kids. The book thing seemed to be very confusing for a lot of students. They're not sure who's paying, and that's an expensive, it's an expensive bill. So I think that it's really important that, you talk about that. We talked about sleep, how much sleep do you need? And they said between 7 and 9. I would say between 8 and 9 is better. When are they going to work? And the big one that was so interesting is, how should you communicate with your parents at college, and how frequently do you need to do that? And then some of them said, oh, I'll just call once a week, and said, I don't know, I'll shoot a text once a week. And Others said, oh no, I talk to my mom every day. So you want to establish those communication expectations. How do you want your child to communicate with you and how frequently? And so let's go to the next screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I did this presentation out of order. And so I did basically a lot of the transition issues that are going to come up first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about those students that are not decided yet. And I understand that it's late in April, but we do have a good portion of those. And so I think it's important to address the needs of those students and say, okay, how do I help them make these decisions in this final hour? And for those of you still on wait lists, it's important to think about how do I get off those wait lists and what realistically are my chances? Okay, so in choosing the right school, we really want to talk about the right fit. And often students struggle with the right fit academically is at one place. The right campus that I like is at another place. And the right fit for me socially is at a third place. And that's where I go back to the romantic comedy thing. It's not going to be perfect. There's not going to be a school that's going to fit exactly what you need. It happens very infrequently. So it's really trying to figure out how do you find that right fit, and you know, is there a right school? And what I try to say to students is, you're at this point, and if you're choosing between a couple of schools, you're not going to make a wrong decision. What you want to make sure that you do is make a well-informed decision, and that's very different. So if you're spending a lot of time thinking about where you want to go, what you want to do, then you'll feel confident in that decision no matter what it is, because you will know you have flushed everything out. I mean, one thing that you can do, I encourage students to get a big piece of poster paper or poster board, or use a whiteboard and put it on the kitchen wall. And as you're walking in and out of the kitchen, because we know how much teenagers like to eat, write down a couple pros and cons for each school and see if that, when you look at it, see if that really starts to make sense for you. Call the schools. They all want their yield rates to be as high as possible. They all want to get all the students they accepted to come to their school. And so the best way to go about that is ask questions. They'll be willing to do anything for you in these final hours. Obviously, there are some points that I have here on this slide that are worth thinking about: the ability to graduate in 4 years, the retention rate, the percentage of tenured faculty, you know, cost, proximity to home, all of these things that are important and definitely need to be continually thought about. And how do I find the right fit? And this is how I do it. And don't be afraid to call your student's counselor and say, we're really struggling. I've been working with a lot of parents, and you know what the child thinks or wants to go is not always where the parent thinks is the best fit. And that's hard. That's hard to spend so many years trying to help your student get to this point, and then they don't want to go where you think they would be most successful. And I don't have the perfect answer for that. I tend to believe that it's a very big life decision. And as parents, if we try to choose something for our student that our child doesn't want, they have a very easy target to blame if it doesn't work out. And I think that can do a lot of damage to a relationship that as parents we spend so long trying to develop. So I think it's just worth challenging and discussing options and trying to get your point across without doing it in a way that makes them feel like their opinion and where they want to go doesn't matter, because it does. It does matter. And so the other thing that I really, you know, we've covered this part of the presentation, so I just want to talk about wait lists and a couple of resources that you have in dealing with wait lists. So I don't know if all of you know, and if you have a student on the wait list, it's really important to do two things. And the first thing is to really have your child, you know, keep the hope, but put that really in the back of their mind. You want them to focus on the place that they're going to deposit at, because in general, the acceptance rates off wait lists are very low. Frequently, they are lower than the regular acceptance rates. Some schools are at 5%, some 10, some at 20. I think the highest I saw was 30, but that's it. I mean, the wait list is not something that a lot of students have success getting off of. And so I think that's just really something that you have to accept. There's a couple things you can do. First, I suggest you reach out to your counselor, see if your child's counselor can get some info on what's going on with the waitlist situation at a given school. Second, it is very helpful to send third quarter grades if your child wants to gain acceptance off the list. Get an additional letter of recommendation. Accepted. That's sort of the gold standard. Unfortunately, the very top gold standard is to be able to say that you can be accepted off the wait list and don't need financial aid. It's just true. And how can you figure out what your chances really are? So there's kind of a hidden, I think somewhat hidden secret called common data sets. So you can go into Google and you can type in common data set and the school name. And when you do that, it gives you the ability to see, okay, how many students did they accept off the wait list in any given year? And you can go back a few years. Some schools hide the data and won't share that, but a lot do. And then you have a realistic picture of what your child's chances are of being accepted off the wait list. And be prepared to get that call, maybe not in June, maybe even July. And some students have heard as late as August. So you have to also just kind of establish as a family, okay, this is the point at which we will continue to hope that maybe that will happen. And this is the point at which we're going to move on. And so that's just a really important deadline kind of parameter to put, because that will really make you feel a little more empowered. And you can't really count on it just because the odds aren't in your child's favor. But you can do things to make yourself more noticed. At this point, we have about 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions before I end the webinar. And I hope that I didn't click too fast or looks okay. Obviously, it's a learning curve for us, but we're hoping to do more things with Naviance and other tutorials. And again, the videos will be saved on our YouTube channel, so you have just the ability to access any resources that you need at the time that you need them most. So I appreciate and thank you so much for being here and dealing with me. I don't really like being on camera. I love to public speak, but not in this forum. So it's definitely a learning curve for me as well. So I will just wait a minute or so and see if any comments pop up or questions. Okay, thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.